Start with where the OnePlus 15 is better than the iQOO 15, since there aren't that many advantages, so I'll mention them first. The first thing is, I think, its back cover. This kind of texture, just feels better than the iQOO 15's smooth and slippery back. Whether it's the way it feels in your hand or how it looks, the quality's just better. That's the first thing. The second thing is the bezel on the front screen. It really is a bit narrower, especially the bottom bezel. There is a bottom bezel, but it's slimmer. Everything else is pretty much the same, but the bottom bezel really is a bit narrower, which makes it look a little better. Other than that, sorry, there's nothing more to add. Now let's talk about the main areas where the iQOO is actually better than the OnePlus 15. First of all, this screen is really excellent. I've actually seen some self-media online saying that the quality of this screen isn't good, all sorts of things. Honestly, these people, maybe it's just because it uses a Samsung screen, so they start talking nonsense. Normally, it's hard to say anything bad about Korean products or American products, right? But there's always a big audience online for that kind of talk. It's just like some so-called expert saying that earning 3,000 yuan in China gives you a better life than earning $3,000 in the US. It's the same kind of thing. These people just keep winning with this logic. There's absolutely no doubt that this screen completely outclasses the OnePlus 15 and the 1000 Plus 15. This generation is way worse than the previous one, right? Compared to this 2K Samsung screen, it's really a huge difference. I don't even want to say anything more about it. And then, moving on, let's take a look at battery life next, specifically how these two perform in terms of battery endurance. About battery life, since I didn't have time to test each one in detail with a strict process, I kept it simple. Whenever I could, I tapped Antutu and let both run a test. I ran the test from morning to night, 6 times in total. In between, I took photos and did other things with the phones. The time I used each phone was almost the same. After the first benchmarking round, one phone's battery dropped about 4%, the other's about 1%, but that 1% isn't really accurate. There's one thing I don't really like about Vivo phones. That first 1% of battery at the top is especially stubborn. That's something I really don't like. Other brands like Oppo, Xiaomi, and Honor don't seem to do this anymore. Huawei seems to have a bit of this issue too. So yeah, that's how it is. Back when battery life wasn't that great, this wasn't really a problem, but now it's just unnecessary. When you go for a second round of testing, the gap starts to show. A cable that drops from 90% to 84% is already a 6% difference. Then, in the third round, the gap is already at a certain percentage. With just 8% battery left, the gap widens more. In the fourth round, it seems OnePlus caught up a bit, with only a 6% difference, but that's because there was an anomaly in OnePlus's benchmark score. I'm not sure why. The score dropped by several 100,000 points for no clear reason. Then, after a while, we ran the test again, right? For the fifth round, I made sure to let the phones cool down completely before running the benchmarks again, so the scores were all normal. The iQOO 45 has been performing very consistently throughout. At this point, the battery life difference between the two was about the same as before, so it went back to where it was. That 8%, and in the final round, wow, the battery life gap between the two had already reached 10%. There's really nothing more to say, right? The difference in battery life is right here. It's very objective and very obvious. Now, let me talk a bit about some other aspects of the two systems. In terms of overall system smoothness, both of these are excellent, and their functionality is also really good. Let me mention something a bit more niche, something I personally like. The first thing here is its Office Suite. The Office Suite is really easy to use, no matter if you're on a desktop or a laptop, and regardless of the brand, as long as you're on the same network, the connection is super fast and convenient. Whether it's screencasting or transferring files, it all works really well. In this regard, it's better than the Green Factory's offering. Although Green Factory has a similar suite, it's just not as convenient to use. Another thing is file management, specifically file management between two phones. Nanchang does this better than Green Factory. If you often use file management tools, you'll probably notice that it really is better done here. As for the other minor features, I won't go into detail. Let's focus on the imaging capabilities of both devices. Even though at first glance, OnePlus doesn't seem to have a big difference in terms of specs, we need to look at the sample photos, right? Let's check out how the sample shots from both perform. We'll go straight to shooting night scenes. The differences in daytime scenes are really minimal, so there's not much point in comparing those. So let's just go straight to night scenes. For this particular scene, I didn't turn on the landscape mode on the iQOO. Both were shot in standard mode. The ultra-wide angle on both is 16mm. You can see that the exposure on the OnePlus side is a bit lower, while the iQOO 15 appears brighter. It's just that their exposure strategies are different. As for detail rendering, the difference is actually quite small. For the ultra-wide angle, let's take another look at the main camera. As you can see, when you zoom in, the iQOO is still slightly better. Some of the shadow details are indeed a bit better. Now let's look at the telephoto. One is 3 times, the other is 3.5 times. Although the OnePlus shoots from farther away, its image quality is definitely not as good as the iQOO's. This is obvious to the naked eye. Then, when you zoom in to 6 times and 7 times, which are also recommended focal lengths, the iQOO still takes better photos than the OnePlus. Let me switch to another scene. Here, the iQOO has turned on its hive mode, and this is the ultra-wide angle. Looking at it from both sides, the iQOO performs a bit better here, though the difference isn't huge. As for the main camera, the iQOO also does a better job. But when it comes to the telephoto lens, the difference is much more noticeable. iQOO is clearly ahead in this area. The text looks more solid. The shots from OnePlus are a bit blurry, but of course OnePlus doesn't perform poorly in every scenario. Its exposure strategy, for example in scenes like this, tends to be a bit darker overall, which actually gives you more of that night scene vibe compared to iQOO, right? Even though at the time the lighting was actually quite bright, so maybe the iQOO is more true to what I actually saw, but the OnePlus looks a bit more forgiving and comfortable, right? If you zoom in to look at the details, the difference in the ultra-wide angle isn't that big, and as for the main camera, the details on the iQOO side are clearly a bit better, and for the telephoto, it's pretty much the same conclusion as before. The iQOO is also better than the OnePlus 15 here, and it's the same even at 6 times zoom. Yeah, I really don't have time to do more comparisons, because work is honestly pretty busy, so I can only cover what I'm able to. But overall, I really think the iQOO 15 is so much more worth it than the OnePlus 15. If both phones are sold at the same price, I honestly, unless you really just love the design of the OnePlus or you care a lot about that tiny bit of screen bezel difference, I honestly can't find any other reason. If I had to choose between these two phones, I can't find any reason to recommend the OnePlus to you. The iQOO is clearly the better device. Even if you bring in the Redmi K90 Pro Max, I would still recommend the iQOO 15. Right now, among these 3 flagship phones in the 4,000 yuan range, the iQOO 15 is the most worth recommending. But there's also the Realme GT8 Pro, right? Is it any good? I'll show you guys in a couple of days. Let's see how that phone is.